Awesome, welcome back. So next up we have the amazing Tanya Mushtaq, Head of Marketing Asia Pacific and Japan for Dell Boomi. Tanya joined Dell Technologies in 2015 as a marketing business strategy manager across Asia Pacific and Japan to set up and launch the regional marketing organization for Dell Boomi, a Dell Technologies cloud integration startup. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you for having me.
After the presentation, Tanya will carry on the conversation with our panelists. So we've got Dan Petrovich, the Managing Director of Dejan here, and Jason Munn, Director of Search and Insights at Overdose Digital. So we've got a big powerhouse panel here. So really excited to see how that unfolds. So Dan Petrovich is, of course, web author and innovator of one of Australia's best known names in SEO. And Jason Munn helps businesses understand how to get their most from their SEO and online marketing. It's a long-standing proponent of sustainable optimization techniques that integrates across a business's whole marketing function. So Tanya's here with us today to talk about the actual science behind effectively cutting through marketing noise to create truly engaging content with her presentation, which is, drumroll, cutting through content catastrophe. Cacophony, the 7 C's of smart content you can't ignore. Take it away, Tanya.
Thank you. There's a lot of C's there. So I am just waiting for my
we've got the
presentation.
Have we got the slides up? Sorry, guys.
That's okay. I can start by introducing myself.
Yes. Start by introducing yourself and let's go over the start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the topic today is cutting through the content cacophony, which really is something very close to my heart. I think I started building content when I was quite young, and over the years I've really perfected the art, and I've done a bit of research into the science behind it. And there's actually a science behind engaging the audiences. It's not just about creating stuff randomly and then just going out there and pushing content out. So basically, one of the things that I like to share with people is that there's a lot of marketers, content marketers out there. However, they're having trouble understanding how to engage audiences effectively. One of the things that I always say to people is make sure that you are having a method, not the madness. Please eliminate one from the other, because marketing departments and communications departments are under a lot of pressure. They're mostly under-resourced. There's a lot we have to do to actually deliver revenue for the business. However, what we end up doing is creating a whole lot of content, and we don't really get to understand the audience. And this is the problem, where we are unable to engage people very quickly. Now, there's also a time frame in mind. We have to keep in mind that it's not going to happen overnight. So we have to make sure that whatever we are doing is going to take some time to actually get some outcomes. So to start with, I'm going to practice what I preach, and I'm going to share with you exactly what I'm going to share, the 3 key takeaways from today.
Sure. So just before you do that, Tanya, I might just ask the guests really quick what their thoughts on this is. I mean, you guys work with clients every day. What's the thought process behind a lot of them outputting that content? Is it just scattergun approach, or do you guys elect for more of that sniper approach when outputting that content?
Yeah, well, I think one of the C's of the content, if I could invent one, would be cause.
Yeah.
I see too many people just pumping out content without any real purpose. So what is the reason that this content piece is going out? Because we certainly don't need any more content on the web. It's saturated already.
Absolutely.
And my research that I'm currently running shows what I've done 3 years ago and then 3 years ago before that, is that people are just sick of content, and there's too much and too long content pieces, and their reading habits are completely different.
Absolutely.
So the cause and the reason for content production is a really key question.
Absolutely. And Jason, do you have anything to chime in on that?
No, I completely agree with what Dan just said about, there's a lot of content in the world now, and people just need to stop and think about the purpose of that piece of content, what it's trying to achieve, and what emotional elements that you want to tap into to the target audience. You can't just spray and pray and hope that the content will work.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of data points now that we can leverage to make sure that our content will stick.
Absolutely. And Tanya, hopefully you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess I'm not going to just tell you very high-level information. There's, as I said, there's a science to this. Firstly, I think. Let's move to the next slide. So the three key takeaways that I have for the audience today who are listening is what works in content marketing. You know, what is the truly engaging factor that we need to absolutely incorporate in every content that we create? And it doesn't have to be long pieces of content. They can be short pieces of content, but they need to have a science, a method to it. And the universal elements. Before we get into the cultural, demographical, regional nuances, let's have a look at the universal elements that are working and what's at play here, what appeals to the majority of the people, and also how to build content for the next generation. I think for a very long time we were trying to understand the millennials. That ship has now sailed. We can only influence the Gen Z because they are now coming into the workforce. So how are we going to have content that's scalable? What we create, how can we scale it down via different mediums and also for different audiences of different generations. So that's something really important, and I would love to share that with you today. So I guess to start with, one of the things that I like to say is one of my idols, Peter Drucker, said, you know, there's only one purpose of business, and that's to create a customer, right? So if we are looking at creating a customer, what do we need to do as content marketers? We need to understand the customer. We need to understand who our ideal customer is. And this is something that I always say to people is look at understanding the customer beyond the tip of the human iceberg. There is a human iceberg. And if you're going to create truly engaging content, you will need to go beyond the tip of the iceberg. So what am I talking about here? So here, if I look at the human iceberg, you know, there are three zones that I talk about. Now, Tony Alessandra, I did some research a while back, and he actually identified 4 interpersonal zones. Now, these 4 interpersonal zones, you know, exist, but I think as content marketers, the top 3 are very relevant. So there's the public zone, the social zone, and the personal zone. What I mean by these 3 zones is that when we are creating content, a lot of the times we're just creating content at the top level, which is the public zone. And here we are looking at the name, the role, the title, the company, industry. You know, this is what's obvious to us, but this is the stranger zone. In order for us to create engaging content, we have to go beyond the tip, beneath the tip of the iceberg. Now, 7/8 of the iceberg is generally under the tip, right? So that's the strongest part of an iceberg. We have to make sure this is where the belonging happens. This is where the emotional, you know, people share their habits, their likes, their dislikes, their common interests. And this is where you start to create some engagement with people. With content, I will show you how we can do that as well. And then there is another level, which is a personal level. Now, this is where we form cults and tribes and fans. Content, right? How do we get to this level? Now, social zone is about 4 meters, they say, in distance, and personal zone is where you can touch people, right? So this is a very, very important part of understanding the human iceberg. So in the new world, you know, a lot of people say, yeah, we're B2B, we're B2C. But the marketing world is no longer about B2B or B2C. Things have changed. Because for the first time in modern history, we're going to have 5 generations working together. So we actually have to make sure that we are understanding very clearly that it's now B to me. It's no longer B2B or B2C, it's B to me. And this means that we have to make our content relevant, we have to make it fresh, we have to make it repeatable. Because unless we are making it repeatable, and as I said, we have to make it scalable. Which medium appeals to these generations? So is it written? Is it audio? So can we convert our content into a podcast, for instance? Can we convert it into an audiobook? So the 7 C's that I like to share today are basically, to start with, You have to be clear, concise, and continuous. As I said, repeat, repeat, repeat. But make sure it's clear. Tell them exactly what they'll get out of it. So listicles work really well, right? 7 C's of content marketing. So you know exactly what you're going to get out of it. Everyone's time poor, so we have to make sure that we are giving them exactly what they're going to get out, make it snappy, and repeat it. Be creative and be courageous. You know, don't differentiate yourself. Unless you are going to make something stand out, it will not stand out. There is a lot of content. Content is now democratized. Everyone can create content. People can create websites and they can post anything, anytime. And social media is very big. So we have to make sure that we are doing that, but also appealing at an emotional level. And be daring, because I just say to people, don't be vanilla. Vanilla's only good in a milkshake. I don't care what people say. And then customer told. We have to make sure that you are engaging customers. Now, what's the science behind all this? And I did say that there's a science behind it, because when storytelling actually releases dopamine in the brain, dopamine is associated with memory. We can remember vivid facts and details about a story if it's told well and there's emotion involved in it. So it's not something, and people make their first impressions basically in the 1/5 of a second. And that's the science. So 3 seconds is the longest it takes somebody to decide whether they like you or not. And video case studies actually take somebody to a personal level, because pain is universal. Emotion is universal, right? So fear, anxiety about a new project that you can help them with. Tell them exactly how you can help them. It's very important for us to deliver that message, and deliver it well, and deliver it straight away. Because in the first 3 seconds they made up their mind, they've moved on if they don't like you. And this is a study that was done by University of Pennsylvania, actually not that long ago. So get into the personal zone and get into the social zone by appealing, because for Gen Z, the top 3 priorities are identity, relevance, and trust. You have to create that in every single piece of content that you create. And last, well, collaborative. Talk to people in your organization. Talk to them often. Ask for feedback, because there are people who are talking to the customers at a personal level, people who are embedded within these organizations, implementing the solution that you have actually marketed. These are the people who are hearing the stories about their family, their friends, and their lifestyle. You can understand what appeals to them, what medium will work for them. Take that feedback, incorporate it, refresh and repeat. Because out of 100 pieces of content you will create, if 98 are donkeys, 2 are unicorns. You take those unicorns and then you repeat them, you scale them, you make sure they're appealing to all generations. And this is how we create smart content. There is actually a science behind it. And make sure you remember the top few words of a content are the ones that are going to engage your audience. And make sure there's emotional connection to it. Make sure that they're clear and they know exactly what they're going to get out of it. And that's one of the things that I wanted to share with everyone. There is a science.
What an absolutely fantastic look into the world of content. I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, man, I wish half our clients were, I hope all our clients are listening to this and incorporating this stuff. So huge thank you to Tanya Mushtaq, Head of Marketing, Asia Pacific and Japan for Dawabumi. If you want to be part of the conversation, ask us a question on globalmarketingday.com. Use the hashtag #globalmarketingday. So, to the panel. As 91% of B2B marketers are using content marketing to reach their audience, what are some pitfalls you've seen in that content creation process, and how did you correct that?
I suppose I've seen people push out content that is not catered towards how people actually consume content online today. Goes into big storytelling, tells big stories before getting to the point. So my rule in solving this is to ensure that the first paragraph, which was already mentioned, the first paragraph of a piece of content answers potential questions that were hinted to be answers in the title of the content piece. So what does this mean? A lot of people say, oh, if I give out the answers in the beginning, people won't continue reading, so I've abandoned the content piece. But that's not true. If you answer it and they are satisfied with it, they will continue reading if you provide the hook for the rest of the content. So in the first paragraph, you deliver to the promise of the title, and you sell the reading of the rest of the piece.
Fantastic. And Jason, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. So in B2B specifically, the main lead generation tool is generating white papers and ebooks and stuff like that. And because it's sort of like social norm now, where if you're in B2B, you need to have an ebook and you need to have your lead capture form there. But most of the times when you look at the ebook, there's not much meat in it, and you just look at it and go, this is nothing. This is just pure vanilla, like you said, vanilla information. It doesn't really help me solve the issue. It doesn't give me enough information to go, I want to find out more. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to fill in that form. People just go, this is our brand. This is why we're awesome. And that was it. There's not much meat into it. So I think people just need to slow down and think about what emotional impact you want to make from the piece of content, and then generate it to answer that specific query, question, and solve that specific problem.
Absolutely. As Tanya says, no point content for the sake of content.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I just also say, just to add to that, it's like, I'll give an analogy. It's like talking to a friend, that you've got a problem and you're talking to a friend, right? And then he or she just keeps butting in and telling them all about their life.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to tell them something, but you just can't get a word in, right? And this is what a lot of organizations do. They're telling people what they do.
Yeah.
Constantly.
They're just holding a megaphone and
you're not asking the question. You're not appealing to their pain and how you can solve them, like real examples or real hints on how they can solve those problems.
The bottom of your iceberg is really the holy grail.
That is it.
If you can impact people on that level, then you've achieved your goal with content.
Exactly.
But that's really, really difficult.
That is it, yeah. Yeah, within touching distance.
Yeah, I think the most important part is the last slide that you have, which is collaborative. I think thinking about all the previous content marketing initiatives that we've done as an agency is getting information from customer service people and the call center people, asking them what the most common frustrations that your clients have, and taking those and generating content to answer those questions. Those are what we call content that hits all your 7 C's essentially.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I've got a question from the audience, and by the way, guys, amazing questions. Keep them coming. They're just rolling in, so just keep that coming. So I've got one from Creative here. So Jason, how important is the digital marketing funnel in all the channels that we have, right? Is it comprehensive? Should we be focusing on an individual channel? And can you guys explain what the ideal application of that funnel is? How do we look at that?
It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I personally don't think a business should be focusing on one single marketing channel. That's like putting all your eggs in one basket. The most success that we had is when clients invest in multiple channels and not over-invest in a single channel, because SEO is my game, and if all my clients were just solely investing in the SEO, what if Google shifts the goalpost tomorrow? Total wipeout. You can't just rely on a single marketing channel. So it really depends on the type of business, and I think you should diversify in terms of your channel investment.
Absolutely, and I think what Jason's talking about is great. People can specialize, and people should specialize in what they do, but as a brand, it's your job to have multiple channels of marketing going on. Absolutely. So, Dan, I've got one here from James. Does anyone have do you have a good blueprint for millennial content creation for brands? What are your thoughts on that? Do you look at it differently when writing for millennial content?
Well, there are technical aspects to writing the content for the impatient reader. One of the biggest challenges that I found is that, and this actually took years to come to, is that every click that your content receives, the user knows that they can quickly go back to the wealth of the content that they chose from. This
Absolutely.
would be Google Discover or search results or a social feed or Reddit or any other source. Their mindset is, I can just click back and go back to where I come from to choose from more.
Yeah.
So on a technical level, we need to engage users very quickly, be concise, provide very quick answers, and then deliver that extra value. But then comes the next part, reaching them on a personal level. And I think the only way to do that is through authenticity, proof, trust, and brand strength. If you're not a well-known author or a brand, and if you cannot prove that what you're writing is the truth, that's not going to go down well with millennials. So this is something that you really, really need to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's people get so caught up, like you mentioned earlier, on including their story and not answering the question. And what we as users do is we bounce straight back to wherever we came from, whether that be the search results, another forum, or something else. So you really hit the nail on the head with answering that query as quick as we can. So just launching into another one, I've got Steffi here, this one's, I believe, for Tanya, but I want to open it to the panel. So, hi Tanya, what do you think would be the medium that will be on the trend, or will be trending next year? Do you think podcasts and live streaming will be mainstream globally in 2020? And I want to pull this out because we were talking just before we went live with some of the panelists about the live stream and how that might look. So, Tanya, what are your thoughts?
Look, one of the things that I always say is that you cannot undermine the power of audio. Audio allows us to do a lot of other things while we're listening to stuff, right? So there is let's look at our society at the moment. And in our society, people are time poor. They're doing multiple things at the same time. And also, they're trying to get more information faster, right? So earpods, headphones, everybody's wearing them these days. So I believe that podcasts or audiobooks are going to be the next big thing. So if you can, as I talked about, the scalable content, if you can create a piece of content and then you can make sure that it can be converted into a webinar or an ebook, an audiobook or a podcast, short podcasts are fine. That's the future. You can't kill audio. Right, there's too much importance to audio because it allows us to do multiple things. So that's important, but also, we're reading on small screens all the time. So if you're creating content, make it short. Make it a short synopsis that's really got all the links to it. So if they can be engaged with the content, the synopsis that they're reading, then they can go and dig in for more information. But don't give them a long white paper and say, hey, go read this. There's a lot of single parents out there pushing prams and they want to listen to stuff rather than read stuff. They can't, you can't do two things at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that audience and how to deliver it is so important. I mean, just a famous example that in my head is one time I met someone who was a coach around saving time, and he wrote this very comprehensive book that was about 800 words on how to save time. I don't have time to read that book. I'm sorry. So that's about knowing your audience and knowing how to deliver that content. Jason, you would have heaps of thoughts on this with SEO and people maybe putting out the wrong type of content. I mean, how often do you see this, and what advice would you give to clients?
I think content is a very hard investment to justify as a business, because if you want to do it right, it does cost a lot of money. But when you execute it right, again, just to reiterate what Tanya said, you create the content once that is portable. You can then chop it up into a podcast, an infographic, a ebook, a webinar, so on and so forth. So I think planning the content up front and knowing that you are going to go multi-channel with that piece of content, I think that's the point of success there. You can't just go, I'm going to write a 7 how best to do things and a listicle thing and just publish the article. No, you got to think about, okay, what are the mediums I'm going to be posting and sharing this piece of content, and how else can I chop and change the content to appeal to that specific channel and their audience.
Absolutely. And Dan, I mean, you guys have done heaps of research on this. Is anything to add to that?
I mean, a good content piece is a gift that keeps on giving, and most of our clients see content piece as something that drives links or increases the rankings, and I like to say, well, what if Google didn't exist? Would you still publish this content piece? And what would it do to your brand awareness and reaching the customer and getting your message across? So that's something that people need to consider as well. Poof, Google's gone, doesn't exist anymore. What do you think about this content piece now?
Absolutely love that. I love people to start saying, what if Google didn't exist? Almost like a hashtag when it comes to, am I putting out this content for the sake of Google, or do people actually want to read this? Am I actually matching a search intent or a demand for this? So really, really awesome to hear there, Dan. Going into the future, right? So we're going into a time machine now. What's going to happen? Well, how are we going to be changing our thoughts about content in the next 5 years, for instance? What are we going to be doing differently, Dan?
Something's already happening, and I wrote a piece many years ago, Conversations with Google, was my predictions about what Google will do with conversational search and our interaction with it. And the other day, the auto captions started popping up into Google's products, including Google's Meet, which is the conferencing platform. You can now speak in the meeting, and it'll be auto captioning all your stuff. So what I'm waiting to happen is Google actually allowing you to download that file and having the metadata within your video files and audio files, because audio is important, right? And video is important because it connects you on a personal level. But what I feel is missing is that metadata or the content being spoken. Usually you have the video or audio content in the transcription, but they're not linked. You can't just go directly to that spot. So I predict that this will happen very soon for us.
Amazing. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Jason, throwing out a bit of a conflict question around SEO. So Shona, and again, thank you so much for the questions, guys. They are rolling in. I'm getting them. I'm going through them. Google wants length for SEO, right? But consumers don't want to read it. How do we fix that? What do we do about that?
I think Dan mentioned the reverse pyramid method of generating content. So it also depends on who you're trying to target, right? So, all right, if you're targeting a time poor person, you give them the information up front, short snippets at the top, tease them enough to want to read more. That method works really, really well. You look at all the most successful articles and blogs out there, they all adopt the same method. They tease you enough to want to engage further. And, that satisfies two things. It satisfies the user, it keeps them engaged, but also satisfies the Google algorithms on wanting in-depth content.
Absolutely. No, thanks for that insight, Jason. And thank you to all our special guests. Thank you, Tanya Mushtaq, Head of Marketing, Asia Pacific and Japan for Dell Boomi. Dan Petrovich, of course, the Managing Director of Dejan. And of course, last but not least, Jason Munn, the Director of Search and Insights at Overdose Digital. So tons of great information on attracting the perfect audience for you guys here, delivered straight to your screen. I can't wait to see how some of you guys implement that. And if you're on social media, share your favorite content marketing tips using the hashtag Global Marketing Day. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to continuing on the conference.